Before anyone argued about LGBTQ lessons or parental opt-outs, this hearing was already heading toward a much bigger collision. Because lawmakers weren't simply asking what schools allowed students to do. They were asking whether the same rules apply when the message changes. The question sounds simple. Would schools support a different form of student activism? But beneath it sits a more difficult concern. Public institutions often describe themselves as neutral spaces. The real test comes when they're asked to facilitate speech that may challenge their own priorities or the priorities of the communities they serve. And once that question entered the hearing, every answer became a test of consistency.
In May, you approved an agreement for teachers and students to attend a so-called Day of Civic Action. The Chicago Teachers Union said the day was necessary because, as was stated in their May Day resolution, public education is facing unprecedented national assault driven by MAGA Republicans. Your district even promised to provide buses and sack lunches to up to 100 schools. Dr. King, are you committed to making the decisions like this fairly, without political bias, and regardless of which party or politician that is being protested?
Thank you for the opportunity to clarify the May 1st. That was a full day of instructional activity, and our students did engage in civic activities, whether in the school or across the district. And that is part of CPS's goals to engage students civically. We do have a Department of Civic Engagement.
Okay, well, would you approve a similar request for teachers and students to attend March for Life and protest the evils of abortion?
This is where the conversation becomes more complicated. Because neutrality isn't difficult when everyone agrees. Neutrality becomes difficult when institutions are asked whether they would facilitate viewpoints that make people uncomfortable. Most viewers missed what was happening here. The questions about abortion and school choice weren't random examples, they were stress tests. Lawmakers were probing for something much bigger, whether civic engagement means encouraging participation in general, or whether some forms of participation are easier to support than others. Because if trust in public institutions depends on fairness, then consistency matters just as much as intention. And what happened next took the hearing into even more contested territory.
This was not a politically slanted event. The day of instruction. So curriculum was expansive, and there were options. The curriculum was decided at the school level, and so were the field trips as well.
Okay. The academic results produced by Chicago Public Schools are among the lowest in urban areas across the country. In 2024, 31% of fourth graders nationwide were at or above NAEP proficiency in literacy, compared to only 23% of the CPS fourth graders. Similarly, 40% of the public school fourth graders were at or above proficiency in math, while Chicago scored a measly 24%. Given academic results produced by CPS schools, increasing education options for families in Chicago is obviously urgent. Would you approve a request for students to support school choice and want to voice their desire via what you would call a protest in favor of more school options and greater educational freedom?
CPS values school choice and parents' ability to choose the type of schools they would like for their child to attend. We have options, public schools, we have district-led schools, charter schools, we have magnet schools for our parents to choose from, as well as selective enrollment schools. So we do support school choice.
This was the moment the hearing changed. The argument was no longer about field trips, civic action days, or instructional activities. It became a dispute over something far more fundamental. Who gets the final say when schools and parents disagree? The answer matters because modern education debates increasingly involve competing responsibilities. Schools are expected to educate diverse student populations. Parents expect to remain the primary influence over their children's values and upbringing. Those responsibilities often coexist peacefully, until they don't. And when lawmakers ask a direct question and believe they still don't have a direct answer, the disagreement immediately becomes larger than one school district. Because underneath this exchange is a question communities across the country are still wrestling with: where does educational authority end, and where do parental rights begin? The hearing ended. That question didn't.
Very good. Dr. King, after the 2025 Supreme Court case of Mahmoud versus Taylor, has CPS changed its policy to allow parents to opt out of LGBTQ+ curriculum for religious reasons?
CPS is in compliance with the Illinois state law as far as the opt-out of sexual education curriculum.
But are you following the Supreme Court decision?
We follow all local, state, and binding federal laws.
Okay, well, I'll take that as a non-answer. Dr. Spence, do you allow parents to opt out for religious reasons for LGBTQ policy within your school district?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Dr. Sue?
To the best of my knowledge, we do.
At this point, the argument moved beyond policies and legal questions. Now the issue was confidence. Because public education depends heavily on trust between schools and families. That's why the accusation involving parents being labeled as agitators or even terrorists carried so much weight. The superintendent rejected that characterization entirely. But the fact that the issue was raised at all revealed something important. Many of today's education debates are no longer simply disagreements about curriculum. They're disagreements about whether parents feel heard, respected, and included in decisions affecting their children. The hearing ended with assurances that parental voices matter, but underneath the exchange remained a question that school systems across the country continue to confront. How do institutions maintain public trust once families begin to question whether they truly have a seat at the table?
Okay, I don't think the websites for Dr. King or Dr. Sue reflect that to this point, so you might want to update your school's websites. Parents have every right to make decisions or at least express their views on what type of education their children are receiving in school. However, schools in your district, Dr. Spencer, teachers are receiving school board terrorist training on how to handle parents expressing their views, and even go so far as to call parents agitators and disruptors. Dr. Spence, do you believe that the parents have the right to express their views and have a seat at the table when deciding what their children are learning in classrooms?
Of course I do, and if I could clarify, their teachers never received any such training, and I think what you're referring to is some reporting that our school board may have engaged in some training, which was also inaccurate. There was no training on parents as terrorists. Just to quickly clarify, under Virginia Code, when a school board goes into closed session, part of the language of going into closed session is about terrorist activity. They read the language of going into closed session for the purpose of a safety and security training, and that reporter interpreted that as talking about parents as terrorists. Absolutely untrue and false. Our parents are not terrorists. We work alongside our parents every day, and of course I support the right for our parents to talk with us about their concerns.
Thank you. What steps are you taking to ensure that parents are allowed to speak on their beliefs without being labeled agitators?
I mean, frankly, we don't have to take steps. Our current policies and practices make sure that that happens. We welcome public comment. Our school board receives more public comment, frankly, than any school board I've ever participated in my 15 years as a superintendent, and they welcome it, and they value it, and they take that into account in their decision making.